got barbecue back there? And you didn't invite me? Hurt my feelings.
What's good? Welcome back to another Destination Dynasty quick hit show. If you haven't already, like and subscribe to the new DDFFB YouTube channel. Engage in the comments. Leave some ideas of what you want to hear me cover throughout the rest of the spring on this show. The podcast will be back shortly. Longer form audio breakdown on the Destination Dynasty podcast feed coming back soon. In today's show, I'm going to talk about the theory of trading away non-elite players. Okay, just to get right to it, here's what I mean by non-elite players, because we all can think of some injuries that happened during the season where some cornerstone players or players that you would probably rank inside, I don't know, the top 20, top 25. I have Keep Trade Cut up right now. And if you just look at this cutoff, this is sorting through Superflex ranks with a tight end plus premium. So we're probably thinking like a 1.75, 2 PPR, or maybe a start 2 tight end league. Here where there's kind of a cutoff right around player 16 through, let's call it 25, 30. And then right when you dip below that, you're down in this range where it starts here with Breece Hall, Bucky Irving, Kyler Murray, T. Higgins, Kyron Williams, etc. So whatever the number is, let's just use an arbitrary number of the top 30 players in Dynasty, whatever that might be. Some people do their own rankings. Some people do their own tiers. I'll give a shout out to John Bauer on DD. Has his own tiers that he literally updates multiple times a day. I'll post those inside the Discord. So if you're interested, ddfantasyfootball.com, check that out. But the idea being, when you get outside of this range, so I'm probably not talking about an injury to Puka Nacua, probably not talking about an injury to Rashee Rice. And if there's a couple other names on here that got injured, Nico Collins got injured for a little bit, you get the point. When one of those players gets injured, it's probably less of a flexible trade that you have to make, right? Like you're probably sitting there going, okay, I'm trading Puka Nacua away, but what can I get that kind of keeps me in the same range of potential asset? But here's what I want to talk about today. I'm going to give some examples of deals that I made, but it's the idea when a non-elite player gets injured. So you scroll down a little bit further, and let's just pick a couple random names in here. Jordan Addison's a good one. Currently, here's where he is on Keep Trade Cut, wide receiver 17, 45th overall player. He's a good player. He had a good rookie year. He had a good second year. But if he were to get injured and say he's going to miss half the season, 2/3 of the season, I'm probably okay saying, you know what? He's probably going to get back to a range where he's good, but he's not going to burn me so badly that I couldn't have afforded to trade him away, especially if because he is 23 years old, he still holds the quote-unquote long-term dynasty value that somebody else is going to see and that somebody else is going to say, okay, I'll pay for that, especially if they don't have motivation to care for what he's doing today. And then when you go down further, go here to the second page, you get into players that are down here a little bit further where Chuba Hubbard got injured at the end of the year. Brandon Ayuk, here's another one. I mean, think about Brandon Ayuk. Brandon Ayuk was a clear top 15, top 20 receiver coming into the year. Got injured for the season, and it was kind of like, okay, now there's questions about what he's going to be next year. He's a little bit older than some of these other guys. He's going to be 27 years old. So you get the point. And there's a lot of names that we can talk about, but the idea here being the dynasty game is played week to week, season to season at best. Now, is there a world where some of these guys that got hurt, and I'll give some of the names that I made trades with in 2024, they come back. They will return. They potentially will come back. They'll be usable assets in 2025, and there'll be a couple circumstances where I regret trading them away. However, I think the thing to remember and how to use this information going forward is when one of these players gets injured and you do not have them in this range, I'm okay saying, you know what, let's put them out there and see what I can get back. And at least do the analysis of, okay, I got a injury to Keon Coleman's a good one. He was one of the players that I made a move with. Keon Coleman, he's my wide receiver 35. We haven't included the rookies this year, but let's just say he's a top 36 receiver in my tiers. But he gets injured and he's going to miss half the season. What am I willing to take back that I can feel like, A, gives me better production than he's going to because he's not available, But B doesn't really take me that far away from the construction piece that I was probably putting Keon Coleman in on my roster for next year, whatever it might be. That could be an older player that could produce just as good or better. That could be a similar younger player that's a similar bet to him, but maybe the market doesn't prefer as much. That could be throwing him in a package for some short-term hammer production. But whatever it is, I want to always try to move these players. So that should at least be the assessment of, okay, what can I move them for? And can I have my cake and eat it too? Can I move Keon Coleman and get another similar player that isn't going to kill me? I highlight Jerry Jeudy, because if you would have made a deal like that where you lost a receiver and you got back Jerry Jeudy, you still got back a top 24 receiver that has some value going into the offseason and still has some dynasty future because he's only 25 years old. So if you kind of think about that, like, how do I make a move where I kind of just laterally move from one tier to another, or I replace this player with another player on my roster that fits the exact same construction? And you can always go back, look at Dynasty Daddy, it's football trade database, dynasty-daddy.com, and you can literally plug in some of the injured players from 2024, find the day they got injured, and just look at the trades for the next week or so after that happened. Now, the other analysis might also be, do I have a better shot at holding this asset and using it way down the road? Let's say it's a season-ending injury to a guy like Keon Coleman or Jordan Addison. Are they even more desirable way, way down the road? And I'll talk about that with the 5 deals that I'm going to highlight here. Is it more valuable to have a guy like Rashee Rice? And I mentioned Rashee Rice as being one of those elite assets, but some of the best deals I saw were not deals where Rashee Rice was traded early in the season after his injury. It was the team that waited on Rashee Rice and traded him in week 15, traded him in week 14, because that would have been the asset that other teams would have been looking for. So you might have still been able to get 90% of his dynasty value and production in week 15 because you waited. So that may be another thing you have to consider, is in your league, you have a good but not great asset that gets injured, and the market's just not there. And that does happen. There's a little bit of a lull, and I'll give some examples of some of the players that could happen with. When they're not sexy names, a lot of times people go, I'm just not that interested in this player because they're kind of in no man's land. So I'll give some examples of deals that I made. So this first one, this is in a 12-team Superflex Start 12. It is a 0.25 point per carry with a 1.75 tight end premium. It's a lineup league. And in this example, you can see that on November 6th, I traded away Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, Jatavian Sanders, and a 26th third. But the highlights here being Chris Godwin and Christian Kirk. Now, I had sent out at least 6 to 9 offers involving Chris Godwin and Christian Kirk. Now, Christian Kirk got injured, I believe, October 27th, and Chris Godwin got injured on October 22nd. So they were both injured 10 days before I made this trade, and I had aggressively been sending out trades, given that it's a point per carry and it's a start 12. I probably was just looking for any production that I could possibly get. And I got back Josh Downs. Okay. Didn't love Josh Downs, but he's a receiver that probably fits somewhere between Chris Godwin and Christian Kirk, but he can occupy one of those receiver spots. Now, this is a wide receiver devalued league because it's point per carry. The running backs get boosted, the tight ends get boosted a little bit, and receivers are a little devalued. But I got back a receiver that fits the bill of somewhere between Chris Godwin and Christian Kirk. So, box checked. And at the time, Josh Downs was healthy. Nick Chubb in a point per carry, 0.25 point per carry. This type of player smashes. He didn't smash. I still have a running back that's on a 53 next year, but didn't really help me as much as I thought. That was a gamble that I was willing to make. Didn't pay off. But at the time, I'm sitting there going, all right, Nick Chubb can give me at least what Christian Kirk was giving me. So, okay, I'll take it. And then Jonnu Smith. This was the gem, but this was actually the throw-in in the trade that ended up helping me the most. But the idea was I got back 3 productive players. Now, what side would I prefer today? I'd probably prefer the third, Chris Godwin, Christian Kirk, and Jatavian Sanders. But it's not by so much that I look at this deal and I go, man, I got crushed in this deal. And I made it to the finals. I didn't win the title because sometimes you make it to the finals and you just don't win your head-to-head matchup. But the point was, I would not have really benefited by sitting on the assets that I traded away and not getting back some sort of production. It's a start 12 lineup league. I couldn't afford to have 2 starters that were lost, and I had thinned out my receivers to where Godwin and Kirk were starting. So I had to liquidate them for some production. But I look at this deal and I go, it would have been dumb to not trade them away. And I say that because I have some other Chris Godwin and Christian Kirk shares that I didn't move, that I could have gotten deals like this, and I didn't. So let's go to the next one. So this is a league that I ended up winning, and I made 2 deals. This is a 12-team super flex, start 13. It's a point per carry best ball league. First deal. Now, these were deals that came down to the very final couple weeks. As you see, the deals were made on December 21st and December 28th. It's a best ball league, meaning that you don't have a lot of time to hold on to players that are not playing. They're zeros. And if they're not on injured reserve, you're basically taking a 0 on your active roster every single week. So the first deal, Cade Otton had gotten injured. And if you look at Cade Otton, here you go. He had gotten injured in week 15. He was not going to play the rest of the year. I ended up trading Cade Otton for Jalen McMillan and Brenton Strange. Now, this is a heavy tight end premium. So this is a premium that Cade Otton was smashing. And if you look at his points, I mean, he was pretty much giving me 15 or more points every single week, and it's a best ball league. So having a couple of those guys was big. So I didn't want to trade him away. However, I got back Brenton Strange, who at the time, Brenton Strange was just coming off a great game. Now, albeit Evan Ingram was injured, so people really didn't know what Brenton Strange was going to be. And as you can see, didn't really help me down the stretch. Only had 5 targets in the 2 games that I had him for. But in a best ball league, sure, I'll take the tight end back. But I also got back Jalen McMillan. And if you look at Jalen McMillan's numbers, hit my lineup both weeks, was very good in those weeks. And guess what? I probably have an asset in Jalen McMillan that is just as good as Cade Otton going forward, maybe better. So the idea of just can't trade away Cade Otton because of the tight end premium when he's injured, didn't even think twice. Just took the best deal that I could. And then this deal happened right before week 17. You see, it was a bigger deal, but the highlight here is Chuba Hubbard. Chuba Hubbard had just been placed on injured reserve. And shout out to leagues where you can trade in the playoffs, or you can trade, there's no trade deadline. Chuba Hubbard got put on injured reserve. I gave up Chuba Hubbard and a third. Got back essentially Marvin Mims, Ricky Pearsall, and Zach Ertz. Zach Ertz, great game. Ricky Pearsall, as you see in week 17, awesome game. Marvin Mims, best ball league, gem, 33 points in week 17. This trade literally won me the championship. I only won the finals by like 15, 20 points. This trade won me the title. And it was because in a 0.25 point per carry league, Chuba Hubbard was a good asset. He is a great asset. He is still probably the best asset in this trade, given the format. But a lot of people would have gone, oh, you know what? It's only 1 week. I'm not trading him away because I want him for next year. Don't have time for that. As soon as I can move him, I can move him. Whether this happened in week 12 or week 17 in this case, didn't matter. So another one. This is an easy one. This trade happened December. This was after the Ravens waived Deontay Johnson. Now, I still like Deontay Johnson, but again, this is a deep best ball league, a 12 by 12 best ball league, and it's on sleeper. So there's no injured reserve. There's no ability to stash players. And I was in the semifinals, meaning I couldn't afford that Deontay Johnson 0. Even if he ended up getting claimed by the Texans and playing, I don't have time to wait. And he probably wasn't going to play the week or 2 after he got traded. So basically, when he got waived, he's done. So I went and just looked, what can I get for him? Now, who could have seen him actually getting waived again and then going back to Baltimore? Who the hell knows what he's going to become going forward? But the idea was, who will trade me something for him? Anything. Any receiver that can occupy that spot. I got Pop Douglas. Pop Douglas was good down the stretch, hit my lineup in this league. Again, a deep best ball league, hit my lineup where I had kind of gone, just give me as many volume receivers as possible. Needed another body. Boom. Deontay Johnson, another example. Now, probably on the lower end. But again, a lot of times what happens when a guy like Deontay Johnson, who's already devalued, gets injured, what do people do? Oh, man, I kind of like him going forward for next year, so I'm not going to trade him for what would be perceived a inferior player. I'd argue that Pop Douglas is better than Deontay Johnson, but even if you didn't think that way, a lot of people would go, I like Deontay better. Yeah, but you know what? This is week 16, and Deontay's not going to play. And this guy you're getting back is. And sometimes you get burned on those deals, but in a non-elite player range, how badly can you actually get burned? And then last deal. Here's a deal where 2 different trades that I made on injured players. The first one, Isaiah Pacheco. So this was October 12th. Isaiah Pacheco had gotten injured on September 15th. So I had sent out 4 different offers on Pacheco when he got injured. No bites. And it got to a point where, hey, you know what? I'm probably going to have to package him in a trade. And at the time, I traded away a 25 first, which ends up being the 105. So it's a good pick. This is a 14-team start 12 super flex league. So 105, okay, I had to part with the good pick. But I was able to throw Pacheco in the trade, and I tried just the pick for Bijan Robinson straight up and then move Pacheco for something else. Didn't work. Had to be both. And I hate making anti-leverage trades like this, but Bijan went on. If you look at his results ever since I got him on my team right here, absolutely smashed down the stretch. Week 16 and 17, we ended up winning this league. Gave me 24 and 22 points in week 16 and week 17. But the idea was being able to just keep Pacheco on the side and willing to just throw him into a deal, even though I gave up a valuable first. Having Pacheco injured helped get this deal done. And then the second one was one that people are probably going to see that, why did you make this deal? But this is also a 2 tight end premium league. So it is tough to get him. Last year, Jake Ferguson during the rookie draft got traded for the equivalent of the 103. 102, 103. It's a 2-copy league, so it was like the 105. So basically, very hard to get a tight end. And we stewed on this. We had no tight ends all year. We were just streaming whatever bodies we could get. We had a really good team otherwise, so we were getting by. But finally, after Keon Coleman got injured, you know what? We tried to get a tight end. We couldn't get a better one, so we settled on Dalton Schultz. We had to give up Keon Coleman, who was going to pretty much miss the rest of the year based on his injury, and an extra 3rd and 4th. Got back Dalton Schultz. And as soon as we got Dalton Schultz, and again, we had to start him because we didn't have anybody better. Didn't do great in his first week, 6.5 points, but then had 23 in week 13. Playoffs, not great. Week 15, only 5. Week 16, though, 21 points. And in week 17, we did end up winning the championship. But the point was, we needed an injured Keon Coleman, and I was able to use him in a trade to get a gross tight end. Would I prefer Keon Coleman to Dalton Schultz right now? Absolutely. But the idea being, I had to have the injured player that I was willing to move on, knowing this was going to be a long-term value loss. But it was coming from a range of, okay, Keon Coleman's good. He's maybe a wide receiver 3. He's got some upside. He maybe has a little more of a flexible market, but that's it. Don't be scared to trade a player away, even for something that you need right there in the moment, like Dalton Schultz. And with that, that's the takeaway of this video, is everyone has their own opinions on players. Everybody's going to have their own tiers. Everybody's going to have their own preferences. But in today's Dynasty game, where it is literally a week-to-week rat race, I'm willing to look at every injured player that is outside of that elite tier, top 25, top 30 assets, especially if I can have my cake and eat it too, right? Can I trade an injured Keon Coleman for a similar starting player or player that's contributing that's not going to be a 0 at the end of the year, right? Like Dalton Schultz, is he a 0 next year from a trade value perspective? Probably. But he's probably also going to be the starter on the Texans next year. So for that league, he's going to give me some viability for a year. So I didn't get like a complete 0 going forward. And a lot of times when you can make those deals, you're really just exploiting the fact that somebody else is okay with whatever player you're giving them, and they just have a different valuation on the player that you're getting back. And that's the type of deal that you want to make. And then finally, the assessment comes down to, is it better to move the player now or later? Because I do find that in leagues where it's more active and there's no trade deadline, especially, the teams that had the most leverage to make trades at the end of the year were the ones that were like, yeah, I have Rashid Shaheed stashed on my injured reserve. Now, do you like Rashid Shaheed next year as a top 36 receiver? A lot of people do. But if you were willing to trade him for, I don't know, just a producing player, That's the type of player people wanted down the stretch, right? People wanted that injured Rashid Shaheed. Sometimes it actually helps the rebuilding team. Hey, I want to shed a couple of points. It's week 14. Give me a guy that's injured, but it's also a player asset, and it's not the pick value equivalent of whatever I'm trading away. And a lot of times those injured players that were held in reserve, and instead of saying, well, I need to move Shaheed today to get some production because he was starting for me, he might actually be more valuable for me to hold until the end of the year when there's a wider array of players that are available and there's more people seeking out injured players. Because it is tough. You know, a guy like Christian Kirk gets injured early in the season. He's not a great producer or a great long-term asset. What I found is there's just very little value in him. There's very little demand in him. Stephon Diggs was the same way. But then as you got towards the end of the year, it was like, well, okay, I'll take on those guys for next year because this season is over. So think about that. The theme is literally not holding on to non-elite players. Even if it's not trading them right away, it's definitely thinking about moving them if you need production anytime during the season. Like, don't even really look at the future for a lot of these guys. Cade Otton, Christian Kirk, Chuba Hubbard, Deontay Johnson, Isaiah Pacheco, Keon Coleman, Stephon Diggs, Chris Godwin. That's probably the best producer on here, but still not a top 30 asset. Hollywood Brown was another one that got injured very early on in the year. Yeah, he came back, but he was one of those assets that the entire season you were like, can I get anything of production for him? Sure. And then guys at the end of the year, Chuba Hubbard, Tony Pollard, Dallas Goedert, all those guys got injured at the end of the year. So can I get something short-term from them? Am I really going to get burned that bad if I don't have Dallas Goedert next year? If I don't have Tony Pollard? If I don't have Chuba Hubbard? All three of those guys are probably good next year. But they're not going to kill my team by trading them away, even if it's just for 3 weeks of mercenary production. It's not going to kill or reshape my roster for 2025. So with that, hope you all enjoyed this video. Just a principle that I've found a lot of success in playing in today's Dynasty game. Remember to like and subscribe to the channel. Leave comments. I'll get back with you and continue to support all of the content here on the feed. Be chill.